Hey, it's Martin Griffiths. Welcome to another episode of the Manufacturers Make Strides podcast. And today, my guest is John LaFleur. He's CEO of Fleur Consulting, and John has a vast experience in helping and developing manufacturing companies from the kind of startup stage through to growth and expansion. He's got vast experiences in operations, in manufacturing and in finance, and he's really got a wealth of expertise and thoughts about approaching challenges in different ways, and about building up a really amazing team around you to help make your company a success, particularly when you've got quite an innovative idea. John has lots of experience on how to help that develop and put in the processes that business needs to achieve success. So we talk about all sorts of things, from his current opportunities that he's working on through to things that he's done in the past. And there's lots of gems that come up in today's interview. So let's get straight into it with John now. Hi there, John. How's it going today? Great to have you on the show.
Great. Good to be here.
Excellent. So it looks like you've had a really fascinating career. You've been in kind of multiple startups, and you've been involved a lot in electric vehicles. But just going back in time, how did you get involved in engineering and manufacturing to begin with?
Well, I have a degree in industrial design, which / mechanical engineering from the University of Cincinnati back in the early 80s. So I'm not sure how old I look, but I've been in this business a long time. So we were trained to do concept development as well as mechanical design. And through my career in both design and plastics engineering and metal fabrication production, I grew in my different roles throughout the years to a point where I was in leadership. And so I have a lot of experience in both domestic manufacturing and all different processes, and then importing from all over the world on that element as well. So that's what kind of got me into leadership roles with different sectors.
I see. So what in today's marketplace, it seems that there's more competition from everywhere, that the pace of change is just speeding up and speeding up. What do you think the challenges are today for manufacturers to cope with that kind of competition and that rate of change?
So the challenge, I think it's an opportunity, not necessarily a challenge. Those companies that want to think out of the box, and my background is industrial design, it's problem solving. So I don't approach things, and I have never approached things as, here's the way it's been done, we're doing it that way. I've always been very open to suggestions from employees or outside help or consultants or so forth. So I really think the companies that are going to surge are companies that, of course, your legacy companies, big giant companies are settled in, and they move like icebergs. So they're trying to rush it, but they can't. New companies, startups, people that are on the fringe, or new technology companies have a huge advantage over the big guys. Now, the negative is not as much money. You got to raise a lot of money. So that's something I've been involved in for the last 10 years, of kind of reaching out to the financial institutions, investors, venture capitalists, things like that. But I think really the opportunity for a manufacturer, both domestic and abroad, is the marketplace is gigantic. The speed is important. And a startup or a smaller or mid-sized company can really capitalize on that, competing with the big guys. And you learn from the big guys, you hire from the big guys, and you bring them in, and they know how not to do things, and listen to them, because they'll give you the straight answer.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. So what do you think? So thinking about a manufacturing company who's maybe got some kind of innovative product, or they think they can see a like kind of a niche in the marketplace today. What do you think some of the key lessons that they should know before starting off, or what are some of the key things that they can do to make it more likely they succeed?
So do your research, understand the market you're going after, know who the competition is, do a thorough market study. That is what I've found to be the most important thing, because you need to know who your competition is and what the greatest and latest technologies are that are being used, right?
Yeah.
And in addition to that, you need to reach out. I believe reaching out to outside consulting opportunities. It doesn't always work, but sometimes to bring in somebody from an expert field. I'm on a couple advisory boards myself for startup software and high tech companies. I don't know anything about their technology, but I can tell them what hurdles they're going to face and help them in fundraising or capital venture opportunities or going public, that type of thing. It helps to have an outside person. And I don't want to definitely isolate the company. So if you have a proprietary idea, concept, that's my background, is innovative technologies, really. You want to make sure that you protect your idea or your technology, IP protected, in the intellectual property, and make sure you have all of your ducks in a row when it comes to patents and things like that. That's obvious. I think most people understand that. And then when you share your technology with outside personnel, make sure that you have an NDA in place with any suppliers or potential customers, so you protect yourself and you protect them from any legal aspects. But trying to enter into this race to the best technology, especially in my field at the end of my career, was the EV sustainability field. It's just changing every day. There's new technologies, new motor technologies, etc. So just be very careful to protect your IP.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying there, I've heard it described sometimes to do like a skills map of what skills you have in the company. And, like a typical thing is you'll have like, a sales focused founder and a technical focused co-founder. But you may be missing, someone with the legal, the HR, the IP expertise. When you find those gaps, make sure you've got access to someone who can bring that kind of knowledge on board as well. That's, I guess that's a key thing, isn't it? To fill in those gaps, basically.
And quite frankly, that's what my role was in the companies that I joined. I made sure I put the right people in the right place and the personnel were correct. I dealt with all of the external suppliers, consulting agencies, consulting firms. When you're a startup, you don't jump right in and hire 5,000 people.
Yeah.
You build it. You start working with an exterior or an external engineering firm, an external design firm, an external, a financial institution or a bank that wants to help you through that. You may reach out to an external government affairs guy if you're going to do anything with the government type business or military or anything like that. So putting all those people in place is critical. And that is the building block of the success of a startup. Once you get over the hump and you start building your staff, well, those experts you brought in will build that staff. Yeah. And that's kind of, from a leadership standpoint, you got to let those people do their job, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you touched on it briefly there. You were involved in definitely one, maybe two companies involved with electric vehicles. Tell us a bit more about that. How did because it's a massive kind of growth area. It's an interesting area because there's a huge OEMs who are addressing it. There's lots of different ways. There's lots of smaller companies competing there. What was your experience of that?
Well, I had a long career in a whole different area, which was retail, displays, fixtures. I designed and built stores for Home Depot, Lowe's, and fixtures and displays for Mars and Frito-Lay, and lots of that aspect, right? Not real high tech, more low tech in buildings. The gentleman who started Workhorse and I have been close since college days, and he said, "I need you. We are entering into a very competitive nature, which was the last mile delivery of vehicles in the electric arena." In 2010, 11, he started the company. By 2016, when I joined Workhorse, I was able to take what he built and expand on that. So that was the introduction to early in my career. I did some automotive design way back in the 80s. Okay, we did some plastics work on bumpers and blow molded products, things like that. So I hadn't been in the automotive field. I was in the sustainability field with the retailers because they were all green energy and wanted to do that. So so when I got in heavy and deep, and you got to research, and you got to read, and you got to learn, because every day it changes. And you're an expert today, you will not be an expert tomorrow if you're not constantly on top of it. In today's world, the communication techniques and the LinkedIn and all of the podcasts like you're doing here really support knowledge for companies that need it to compete.
Got you. Okay. So one of the things that comes up a lot is how do you, particularly for startups, I think, is how you handle culture change. And I think there's a few instances where it can be difficult in some of the older, more established companies where the culture is like so deeply embedded, over decades. It's difficult to overcome that. But I think at the other end of the spectrum, like in startups, it's also quite difficult because it can be tied into the way the founders have done things in the first couple of years, maybe to begin with, and that's not necessarily the best way to tackle growth. So what are your thoughts on kind of handling culture change as it goes through those growth stages?
So that's a big good question, because I dealt with that for the last 6 years. You have a startup environment, right? Anybody that was with P&G or the big companies, GE or Ford or Toyota, they have certain ways of doing things. Well, you got to break them out of that mold, because or ask them what worked and what didn't, what held you up or what progressed you, and they'll be honest with you. And you got to take those advice and really implement it. You can't just be a freewheeling, I'm not anything traditional, or you will fail, right? You need stability and process. And a lot of the big companies have great processes. They just take too long to do it. And I'm not saying you skirt safety measures or governmental regulation things, but you can do things a lot quicker as a startup than a big traditional legacy OEM, right? When we took over the Lordstown Motors factory, for example, there were a lot of guys from GM that still stayed there and wanted to work for us, and we had to really vet them, because some were so entrenched into the way it was done, and we weren't going to go that route. Others were so delighted. You wouldn't believe the enthusiasm from people saying, "We're going to do it different, and you're going to let me help you put that together." Well, that was encouraging. It built camaraderie, teamwork, and you need a mix. You need guys that have been in startups. You need guys that have been in established big companies, and you need leadership to lead it. And the leadership level has to be diverse. So Steve Burns, our CEO, was just a blue sky genius inventor, always wanting to invent the next new thing. I was more of I'm creative, but I was more of the hold on, let's focus and let's get this done, and we'll do that later. And then our CFO, of course, didn't want to spend any money, so he kind of limited all of us. So that's kind of and then the sales side is very important at some point, but not in the beginning. You got to have a good product. You got to be good people, and then you can start selling because they believe in the product.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's about getting that good fit of those personalities and those your skills that kind of mesh together well.
And there is a graveyard full of carnage of companies that tried in the EV space alone, not to mention everywhere else. Yeah. But you learn from them. You find out what did they do, what did they do wrong. You do a lot of questionnaires to the customers out there, the potential customers. What didn't you like about startups that you tried? And you bring them into a advisory committee. I put together Duke Energy and UPS and Ryder and all different sectors, and had them as an advisory team. And you wouldn't believe the specifics that were really important to them, but not necessarily to us because we were developing, right? Yeah. So that's another good thing to think of when you're a startup.
Yeah, I guess with that, it's just a challenge though of how much you're, kind of led by them. Like obviously you want to build a product that's got a good fit for your customers, but I suppose you don't want to build something too specific for one, for one customer, or one to something too niche. It was interesting though that you mentioned the questionnaires, because my next question was going to be, do you have any kind of tools or techniques that you think can help with this? I guess those kind of questionnaires and bringing customers on board is one. Any other tools or techniques that come to mind?
Yeah, well, I have tried and true methods of supply chain management techniques and tools. And those are changing. You don't always have to have the big SAP ERP systems that no small startup can afford. And you wonder, how do I do it? Well, most people use their email and they just track and communicate. And it's just so time-consuming burden. And there are now lots of software systems and companies out there, IT and software companies, that are developing cloud-based, supply chain management tools, and that are very inexpensive and much better than SAP, believe it or not. It works with SAP if you want to go after the big guys, but the small and medium-sized guys can do it. I'm actually on an advisory board for a company called CloudSight, and there's a bunch of them out there. And I chose them because I believe they had a good system, and they're mainly for supply chain management and import and export. That's kind of their focus. But what I found is those companies also work with governments and cities and counties and municipalities that are trying to figure out where is their carbon footprint and how are they spending their money and where is all the problems in that type of software, external, not just CloudSight, lots of other Geotab. I mean, there's a ton of companies. Those are tools that would not necessarily be in your playbook if you come from big legacy manufacturing. Yeah. So keep yourself open to the newest, latest, greatest tools. And I will say this, the younger generation, which I'm not of, I'm a 60-year-old, right? They are so much smarter and so much more educated in the technical aspect of software and easier ways to do things that you need to really listen to the younger generation when it comes to technology, if you will.
Yeah. But you think that the kind of the management of the supply chain, do you think that that's one of the key critical things that you have to get right?
That's a key situation. And then one other thing that I found interesting, when I started with Lordstown or with Workhorse, I couldn't get a call back from anybody. Right. Tier ones, forget it. When you don't have any revenue and you don't buy anything, nobody calls you back. As soon as I got the possibility to compete for the post office contract, which was Workhorse was competing, and it went from 30 companies competing down to 2, and we were one of the 2. We didn't win the contract because Oshkosh had a better relationship with the government, military. But what I found was, as soon as I had that on my radar and we were doing work with UPS, everybody called me back. I got everybody. They didn't commit long term, but they'd return my call. Yeah. And for me and for our timing, the COVID situation was an advantage. All the big guys were slowing down because of supply chain issues.
Okay.
We were speeding past the finish line because we were small and nimble and we could do it. And those big tier one suppliers said, do we want to sell to anybody or wait for the big guys? And they said, we'll sell to you. And I secured some major contracts with major suppliers. I'm talking about the big guys, Bosch and Mobea and all these companies, and Samsung and LG. Before anybody else could secure that business, you got to jump on opportunities. So sometimes the negative can turn into a positive, just like the COVID situation did for us. So that's just another thought. Always look for the opportunity to squeeze in between the big guy and the tier one.
Yeah. And I think what you're also saying there is that it's not just down to the tools and techniques, it's also about the personal relationships there as well. Yeah. Excellent. So what are you working on at the moment and how are you seeing 2022?
Yeah, so I retired. I was working 24/7 for about 5 years, so that put about 20 years on my life. When I got my latest notice from Marriott that I had stayed 80 times in a hotel in 6 months, I thought I need to take a break.
Sure.
And my wife needs a little more of my time. So I'm an independent. I have Fleur Consulting. I do independent consulting. I'm also on a couple advisory boards. I'm looking at being on a full-time board for a couple local companies. I'm doing, podcast interviews. But I try to stay neutral when it comes to, my previous companies. I'm supportive of them, but I can't, I try and stay, broad in my ideas and thoughts, because it could seem like I'm partisan in one way or another. So I do these paid consulting, hourly calls with the financial institutions out there that want to know where they want to invest their money. I know all of the suppliers. I know all of the OEMs in the business. I also help a lot of recruiters find people for major OEMs because I know of a lot of them and I've hired most of them. So that's another area that, but I'm not putting myself into a position of having to work 24/7 or even full-time right now. I'm trying to keep that to a minimum, if you will.
Yeah, it sounds like you've earned it. Great. A couple of really short ones to finish up. Do you have any favorite book recommendations?
I am a history buff. So I like to read about history because history tells you what happened and how not to do it. Again, if it went wrong. I also am, I'm a big, sci-fi guy. I love anything, that talks about the future of the ideas that people have. So it's creative. And it lets me kind of lose track of the day-to-day political nature of this whole world. And that's an area. And then self-help books. I'm actually in the process of writing my own memoirs, which will be a while. I'm just starting of my track, and then my success with Ride and Workhorse in Lordstown at the end of my run. So those are things that I like to do. But one particular book, I wouldn't say. I mean, I read a lot of fiction and nonfiction and historical type books.
Okay, excellent. Well, good luck with your own writings, and look forward to that, seeing that at some point. What's the best way if people want to ask you any questions, find out a little bit more about you? What's the best way for people to find you?
Yeah, so they can email me. I have an email, jlafleur@ix.netcom.com. That's my personal email address. And then LinkedIn, if they pull up my profile, John LaFleur. There is another John LaFleur. He's about 30 years younger, and he's not in my business, but some people think that I'm him. I wished I was 30 years younger, but LinkedIn is a big networking tool that I use. So that's pretty much both ways. And if somebody reaches out to me and they want to talk, I can share my phone number with them at some point over the email.
Yeah, sure. Brilliant. Really great to hear the stories and some of your experiences today, John. Really appreciate your time. Thanks a lot for that. And yeah, catch you later.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.